In late August 2005, the city of New Orleans went silent. The levees had failed. 80% of the city was underwater. Thousands of people were stranded on rooftops, waving shirts and flashing lights, waiting for a rescue that wasn't coming fast enough. The official response was paralyzed by bureaucracy, confusion, and the sheer scale of the disaster. The Coast Guard and the National Guard were doing their best, but they were overwhelmed. The water was rising and the clock was ticking. But then something strange happened. On the outskirts of the flooded zones, the silence was broken. Not by the chop of military helicopters, but by the roar of outboard motors and the hum of airboats. A different kind of army had arrived. They didn't wear uniforms, they didn't have orders. They were duck hunters, shrimp fishermen, and oil workers from the surrounding parishes. They were ordinary men and women who had looked at the news, looked at their own flat-bottomed boats sitting in their driveways, and decided they couldn't just watch. They hitched their boats to their pickup trucks, filled coolers with water and fuel, and drove toward the disaster zone. They called themselves the Cajun Navy. When they arrived at the water's edge, they were often told to turn back. Police and officials, following strict protocols, told them civilians weren't allowed in. It was too dangerous, they needed permits. They needed authorization, but the Cajun Navy didn't care about permits. They knew the bayous better than anyone. They knew how to navigate shallow, debris-filled water. And they knew their neighbors were dying, so they launched anyway. They turned the flooded streets of New Orleans into their waterways. Navigating past submerged cars and floating rooftops, they became a decentralized volunteer search and rescue fleet. They communicated not with military radios, but with hand signals and shouts. They used their base boats and airboats to reach the narrow alleys and porches that the big government vessels couldn't reach. For days they worked without sleep. A rugged Louisiana fisherman would pull a grandmother through an attic window. A duck hunter would load a family of 4 and their dog into a flat-bottomed skiff. They ferried thousands of people from their drowning homes to the dry highway overpasses, dropped them off, and immediately turned their boats around to go back for more. There was no paperwork, no payment, no command structure, just a simple code of the bayou. You help your neighbor. By the time the waters receded, this ragtag fleet of ordinary citizens had rescued more than 10,000 people. They proved that in the face of a massive, complex catastrophe, the most effective response isn't always the one that comes from the top down. Sometimes it comes from the pickup truck next door. The Cajun Navy wasn't just a group of guys with boats. It was a realization. When the system breaks, ordinary people become the safety net. They reminded America that you don't need a badge to be a rescuer. You just need a boat, a full tank of gas, and the courage to launch.